Nobody gave Rhea Ripley enough credit for what she was walking into on Smackdown March 27, 2026. The conversation in the weeks leading up to this match had been dominated by the Jade Cargill narrative, by the unstoppable force that Jade had become on Smackdown, by the physical specimen that she represents, and the championship reign she had been building with the kind of dominant energy that makes entire rosters reorganize themselves around a single performer. The consensus was forming. The takes were being written. The people who make predictions and build arguments were constructing the case that Jade Cargill was simply too much, too big, too athletic, too protected, too everything for anyone currently on the SmackDown roster to overcome. And somewhere in the middle of all of that noise and all of that certainty, Rhea Ripley was getting ready. Not getting ready in the performative way that wrestlers get ready on television, cutting promos about their preparation and their mindset and their championship destiny. Getting ready in the quiet way, the dangerous way, the way that people who have been to the top of this company and had it taken from them and clawed their way back up get ready when they have decided that this specific moment is the one that matters. And on March 27th, Rhea Ripley walked into SmackDown and took the WWE Women's Championship from Jade Cargill. And if you are not losing your mind about what that means for this division, then you have not been paying attention to the story that just reached its most explosive chapter. Tell me in the comments right now if you had Rhea Ripley winning the WWE Women's Championship on March 27th, or if Jade Cargill had you completely convinced. I want the honest answers, no revisionist history. Tell me what you actually believed before that match started. To understand the full weight of what happened on SmackDown March 27th, you have to understand both women completely, because this championship change is not a simple story of a challenger defeating a champion. It is a collision of two of the most significant forces in the current women's division, and the result carries implications that extend far beyond a single title match on a single episode of SmackDown. Rhea Ripley is not just a talented wrestler, she's a phenomenon. She's the kind of performer that comes along once in a generation and immediately rewrites the expectations for what a character in professional wrestling can be. The mommy persona, the aesthetic, the physicality, the microphone presence, the in-ring work, every dimension of what Rhea Ripley brings to a WWE arena operates at a level that the rest of the women's division is measured against rather than measuring itself by. Her previous women's championship reign was one of the most dominant and most compelling in the history of the title, and when injury stripped it from her, the void it left was something the division felt immediately and visibly. Jade Cargill filling that void was not an accident or a matter of convenience. Jade Cargill is a legitimate star in the most complete sense of that word. She has the look, the athleticism, the developing ring work, and the specific quality of presence that makes audiences react to her entrance before she has done a single thing inside the ring. Her championship reign had been built on a foundation of physical dominance that the SmackDown women's division had struggled to find an answer to. She was making the title feel important through the authority with which she carried it and through the quality of the challenges she had overcome to retain it. Walking into March 27th, she was not a transitional champion waiting to be relieved of her title. She was a legitimate top-of-the-card performer defending what she had rightfully earned. Trivia question for the WrestlingChord community, and I want this answered from memory. How many days was Rhea Ripley's first WWE Women's Championship reign before she was forced to vacate the title, and what was the reason she had to give it up? Drop the answer in the comments right now. The SmackDown on March 27th had the quality of a show carrying significant weight before the Women's Championship match even began. The events of earlier in the evening, the Cody Rhodes return and attack on Randy Orton that had the entire arena still buzzing, had created an atmosphere where the audience was primed for more significant moments. That priming worked in favor of the championship match because it meant the crowd arrived at this match already at an elevated emotional temperature rather than needing to be warmed up.
When Rhea Ripley's music hit in that environment, the reaction had an extra layer of intensity behind it that you could hear clearly through the broadcast. Rhea's entrance on this night was one of those entrances that the camera cannot fully capture because the live experience of it must have been extraordinary. There is a specific quality to the way Rhea Ripley walks to a ring that defies easy description. It is not the standard confident babyface walk, and it is not the standard menacing heel strut. It is something that exists in its own category, a physical communication of absolute self-possession that reads as threatening and magnetic simultaneously. The crowd on March 27th was responding to every step of it with the kind of sustained noise that tells you this is a performer who has a genuine and deep connection with a live audience that goes beyond whatever character positioning she occupies at any given moment. Jade Cargill's entrance as champion had its own specific energy. The championship around her waist and the bearing with which she carried herself communicated the authority of a reigning champion who had earned her position and who was not approaching this defense with any anxiety about the outcome. The visual contrast between the two women at the top of the ramp before the match began was one of those images that SmackDown produces occasionally that immediately feels like a poster. Two physically exceptional, aesthetically extraordinary, genuinely dominant performers standing on the same stage with a championship between them and an arena that understood it was about to watch something worth remembering. Comment section question. Before this match, who did you personally think was the most dominant woman on the SmackDown roster, and has the result of March 27th changed your answer? I want full responses, not just names. The opening of the match established immediately that this was not going to be a squash in either direction, and that establishment was essential to the credibility of the eventual result. Jade Cargill used her size and her power advantages early in the way the champions defending against challengers who have been built as dominant forces need to, establishing that the title is not going to change hands without a genuine fight, that every inch of this match is going to be contested. Her early offense was physical and impactful, and the crowd responded to it with that slightly complicated noise that emerges when a champion is beating on someone the audience wants to see win. A mixture of appreciation for the quality of the work and urgency for the tide to turn. Rhea's selling in the early portion of the match was one of its most underrated qualities. Great selling is not simply lying on the mat and looking hurt. It is the active communication of damage being absorbed while simultaneously showing the audience that the character is still in the fight, still processing, still finding the reserves that are going to power the comeback. Rhea Ripley sells like a main event performer because she has been a main event performer, and she understands that every moment of a championship match tells a story that the audience is reading in real time. Her body language during Jade's control period was telling the story of someone being hurt but not broken, and that specific story is the most compelling one a match can tell because it makes the eventual comeback feel earned rather than scripted. The moment Jade went for the jaded and Rhea slipped out of it was the first moment the match fundamentally changed direction. The near execution of Jade's finisher and Rhea's escape from it shifted the crowd's energy immediately because it communicated that the finish was approaching and that the outcome was genuinely in question. Rhea's counter out of the jaded position into a setup for her own offense was executed with the kind of technical smoothness that years of championship match experience produce, and the crowd's response to it was the beginning of that building noise that championship matches generate in their final stages when both performers are working at maximum intensity. Trivia for the comments. What is the name of Rhea Ripley's finishing move, and what submission hold does she frequently use to make opponents tap out? Both answers, please. Let me see who knows their Rhea Ripley offense. The Riptide.
When Rhea Ripley set up the Riptide in the closing stretch of this match, the crowd did that thing that only happens in championship matches, where the anticipation of a finisher landing creates a noise before the move is even completed.
The setup was visible, the positioning was right, and the audience that had been watching this match with complete investment understood that they might be seconds away from a championship change. Jade fought it. She used every physical tool available to her to prevent the inevitable, and the struggle was genuine and compelling and added to the drama of the sequence rather than simply being a delay. But Rhea Ripley hitting the Riptide when she is fully committed to it is one of those things in the current women's division that does not get stopped cleanly. The move landed, the cover happened, the referee counted 3. The noise in that arena when the 3 count landed was the second enormous crowd explosion of the Smackdown March 27th broadcast, and it had a different quality from the Cody Rhodes moment earlier in the evening. The Cody Rhodes moment was rage and relief and vindication. The Rhea Ripley moment was pure joy, uncomplicated, unambiguous, full-throated joy from an audience that had wanted this moment and had sat through the entirety of a genuinely excellent championship match to earn the right to feel it at maximum intensity. The mommy is back. The WWE Women's Championship is back where a significant portion of the SmackDown fan base believes it belongs, and the division has its most compelling figure back at the top. Rhea Ripley holding that championship in the center of the ring was an image that carried the weight of everything she had been through since the injury that forced her to vacate it. The months away, the rehabilitation, the return to action, the rebuild, the campaign to get back to this specific moment. All of that history was visible in that image in a way that made it genuinely emotional beyond the standard championship celebration. This was not just a performer who had won a title. This was a performer who had won back something that had been taken from her by circumstances outside her control, and who had done the work required to deserve the opportunity to reclaim it, and then executed in the match when the moment came. Comment section. What is your honest assessment of Jade Cargill's championship reign now that it has ended? Did she accomplish what she needed to accomplish during her time as champion, or do you think there were missed opportunities? I want real, critical analysis in the comments, not just simple opinions. The implications of this championship change for the SmackDown Women's division are enormous, and the conversations that need to happen about where things go from here are just beginning. Jade Cargill losing the championship does not diminish her. The quality of her performance in this match, the reign she put together, the physical and athletic standards she set, all of that remains part of the record and part of what defines her place in this division. How she responds to this loss is the next essential chapter of her SmackDown story. The best performers in this industry are defined as much by their responses to significant losses as by their victories, and Jade Cargill has the tools and the opportunity. The setup was visible, the positioning was right, and the audience that had been watching this match with complete investment understood that they might be seconds away from a championship change. Jade fought it. She used every physical tool available to her to prevent the inevitable, and the struggle was genuine and compelling and added to the drama of the sequence rather than simply being a delay. But Rhea Ripley hitting the Riptide when she has fully committed to it is one of those things in the current women's division that does not get stopped cleanly. The move landed. The cover happened. The referee counted 3. The noise in that arena when the 3 count landed was the second enormous crowd explosion of the Smackdown March 27th broadcast, and it had a different quality from the Cody Rhodes moment earlier in the evening. The Cody Rhodes moment was rage and relief and vindication. The Rhea Ripley moment was pure joy, uncomplicated, unambiguous, full-throated joy from an audience that had wanted this moment and had sat through the entirety of a genuinely excellent championship match to earn the right to feel it at maximum intensity. The mommy is back. The WWE Women's Championship is back where a significant portion of the SmackDown fan base believes it belongs, and the division has its most compelling figure back at the top.
Rhea Ripley holding that championship in the center of the ring was an image that carried the weight of everything she had been through since the injury that forced her to vacate it. The months away, the rehabilitation, the return to action, the rebuild, the campaign to get back to this specific moment. All of that history was visible in that image in a way that made it genuinely emotional beyond the standard championship celebration. This was not just a performer who had won a title. This was a performer who had won back something that had been taken from her by circumstances outside her control, and who had done the work required to deserve the opportunity to reclaim it, and then execute it in the match when the moment came.